Hello, I'm Andre J, and today I'm going to talk about how do you install Video Waves 2.718 from scratch on a Windows operating system. I'm working on Windows 10 here, so I'm not really 100% what's going on. If there's anything super different with Windows 11, I would hazard a guess, probably not. But just something to keep in mind and something to let me know if you're working on Windows 11 and this doesn't really work out for you. So I'm going to walk you through these steps on my website, and it might seem to you like I'm just reading to you the instructions that I've written down, and that's going to be pretty much exactly what I'm doing, because the thing is that like the reason I never really made videos for this is because I wrote down the instructions, and I figured a written down instruction would be like 100 times more useful than like making a full video instruction, because it just literally like it's much more concise. It's like the difference between like like you look up a recipe and then you get like shown like a 20-minute video on how to make the recipe, when you can literally just read the fucking ingredients and like how to put it together in like 60 seconds. So it just felt like really like a pretty serious like just I don't know, a misalignment of priorities, and mostly just sort of like felt like it'd be like catering to the whole like edutainment thing and like encouraging people to not read things. So I just kind of like to say that right out in the front here, is that this video is mostly useless because you can just read this stuff, and you really should, if you feel uncomfortable like with like reading instructions like this, like I seriously urge you to try and overcome that discomfort, because being unable to like work from things that aren't just like a video where someone friendly and handily explains things to you like in a sort of verbal manner, like an oral verbal manner as opposed to a written manner. If you're not able to like work with that kind of stuff, you are at a severe disadvantage to anyone else in the world who can. And like I definitely wouldn't have gotten to this point in my life if I didn't just like have the ability to just like grind down and read things. And I've really done my best in all of my writing to make it the least sort of obnoxiously technical as possible. I know this kind of annoys some people who find the conversational, jokey, very tangential, like typo laden like format of my writings to be like kind of obnoxious, but I'm doing it for a reason. Well, I'm doing it for two reasons. One, it entertains me, and I don't like to do things that don't entertain me, and two, because writing in this sort of loose conversational tone disarms a lot of what could otherwise be highly intimidating material. There's this theory, this dominant like ideology that says like technical writing has to be like dry and like abstract, and have like, if you're writing something that has any sort of like scientific merit or whatever, you have to like completely like write in like an abstract third person as though you don't exist as an entity. And I think that's absolute nonsense, and it's actually like it's very deceitful to write like that, to be honest. But yeah, so we're going to get started. We're going to talk about, so I will, just in the interest to entertain myself, most of all, I'm going to talk about some other things in the process of this. I'm going to talk about what is a compiled program, like why am I asking you to download IDEs and all this shit, what is an IDE, and also close off with a little note on why I tell people not to message me on Instagram for technical support on things. It's not because I'm a mean, grumpy person, although I might become a mean, grumpy person at some point in the future, for the very reason that like if I put myself in positions where I have to respond to the exact same question over and over again for years on end. So that's a little bit about it. But yeah, so we're getting started with Video Wave Suite 2.5. Okay, so I need to definitely edit that on my website. I wrote a big thing yesterday on my website. You can check it out over here in the Video Waves and Friends. And I wrote this little notes and thoughts on nomenclature and added it in here, just to try to explain like a little bit about why there's all these different like nomenclature things, and sort of like all the various kinds of like stupid mistakes I've made over the years that have only increased the amount of confusion, and people DMing me on social media to try to understand like what's going on. That stuff's all my fault. So you can read that little thing there in the Video Waves and Friends section if you're curious about what the fuck I'm talking about. So yeah, it says getting started with Video Wave Suite 2.5. Gonna have to edit that at some point, but for now it's just another distracting nomenclature gaffe. I start off by saying, hey, support my Patreon, hit me up on PayPal. Financial support does mean a lot. It has been making a difference. The slow but steady support that people have been giving me on Patreon is one reason that I'm able to make videos like this. So if you like videos like this, keep the support coming in. Also, if you like the idea that I'm working on a new hardware video mixer that I'm almost positive will be available for sale and for DIY builds before the end of the year, you should also support my Patreon, because that's going to speed things up considerably and make me able to go overboard on features and everything. So yeah, give me money. Good thing we got that out of the way. I always forget to say that in these videos. I mean, I don't know if I always forget. Sometimes forget, and sometimes I just find it kind of like, I don't know, it's like the whole like pledge drive thing. It feels very canned. It feels very sort of like, blah, 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 let me appeal to you, give me money, blah, blah, blah. I'm not a huge fan of it, but it seems to be where I'm at right now, so I guess that is that. So the first step is you download and expand the folder for your operating system. So I would click on this, open link in the new tab, and it'll take you to this RAR. It's a pretty big folder. You just click download, and it'll say, yeah, this is big. There's some viruses in here. Download anyway. There's no viruses in there. And wait for that to download. And then we need to go off this site for a bit and follow instructions for setting up an IDE. So what is an IDE? You know, I forget what IDE actually stands for. Something integrated development environment, something like that. What an IDE is going to do is, so the Video Waves suite, the Video Synthesis Ecosphere Desktop Video Waves 2.718, however you want to call it, these are developed, like I'm giving these to use in raw code format. They're not binaries, they're not EXEs, they're not APPs, they are just raw code, and they're set up so that it's very easy for people to do customization on them. The kind of customization that would really just be implausible or impossible if they were pre-compiled packages, the way that most people interact with software. Like, for example, you want to write your own MIDI interfaces, you want to add audio reactivity, you want to set up a different way of like getting video inputs in. These things are all available. Or if you just like want to experiment and like mess around with different parameters like that I don't allow you, or experiment with adding different functions, different things in the feedback, different things processing the video, you can add these things in. This isn't anything you could do. This is you can't do this in Resolume. You can't do this in Touch. Well, you can do it a little bit in Touch Designer. You can't do this in like, you know, like most sort of video processing environments. So this is really, I think, the main sort of like bonus reason that Video Waves is like very unique. So you have to go, and then you have to go to another link. We download Visual Studio Community 2019. Hey, they've updated this a little bit. It used to be 2017. Well, that's cool. So we're going to keep that. That was this Winland RAR thing and this vscommunity.exe. So we run the installer, and this will pop up. And this, I think here, from my experience when I've run these kind of things in IRL settings, real-time IRL settings, this part is where people make the most mistakes. So we have to do this thing. It takes a long time. We have to install the installer first. What you have to do is select all of the following components. And you have to actually look at this thing, look at this, and look at the side here, and make sure everything is checked over there. So we're going to see all the components you see right here that are checked, and all the components you see right here that are checked. You have to make sure that's what you're downloading. So you cannot, I mean, you can probably figure out some workarounds if you're smart and you've worked with installing IDEs before. If you're coming at this completely blind, just do exactly what this says. Doing anything else with it is going to increase your headaches considerably. This is the #1 thing that people mess up when doing the Windows install. So yeah, make sure you actually take a look at this and and check out what you are downloading. So that's pretty much that. Kind of just have to like reiterate that and hammer down as that is the most important step. If you do that wrong, you're probably going to have to start over again. I'm not going to help you out and like troubleshoot what happens if you didn't check C++ address sanitizer or something. That's going to take about 20 minutes to 30 minutes. So get comfortable. In the meantime, while that's happening, let me just run through quick and just talk about the difference between like what's going on with video waves and sort of how it's different from like something you would get as an exe or an app. So video waves is provided as uncompiled code, meaning that you have an unparalleled access to editing, manipulating, changing, and adapting the video waves programs to whatever your personal needs are. You don't have to, and you certainly don't really need to understand anything about how coding works in order to use video waves. This is just purely optional, and I think it's really important that this is a part of the video waves options because I want to encourage people to think about how they interact with software tools in different ways. There's the standard consumerist approach where you just buy something and then you use it, and you feel entitled to, like, once you buy something, you feel entitled to then be like, okay, well, this doesn't work quite the way I hoped it would. I get to complain to the developers about it, file a report, ask for new features. I get this sort of like I've purchased this social right to sort of bypass like what might otherwise seem to be like unseemly like social interactions, and feel like I have this. I'm obligated. I'm entitled to have this sort of like relationship with the software and the software developers. So that's the standard relationship. As I've sort of stated multiple times in these video waves and things, this is a relationship that you kind of have to get out of your mind when you're working with DIY and open source stuff. Because the reality is, like, buying things, not buying things, you're not entitled to anything. You do need to, like, actually take into consideration that you're interacting with other actual people who have other actual priorities than yours, and that if you're interacting with them, you kind of have to, like, take into consideration that they have other feelings, other priorities, other thoughts on their mind, and that you're not your needs, your desires, your priorities are not necessarily theirs. So just something to mention on a regular basis. The other thing to think about is that when you want to do stuff like, say, so video, when you're designing like video software, the thing to keep in mind is that video processing, video synthesis software, it can be very, very complex. And that's just in terms of like processing and the actual like thing that goes from, oh, video comes in through this webcam, gets dumped into frame buffers, we do a bunch of stuff to it, and then we spit it back out into a frame buffer on the screen. So that's pretty complicated in and of itself, but there's also this extra level of complexity where you start thinking about, okay, so what kind of video formats do we select? Are we supporting? Do we support, say we're just working on the software thing, we still have a huge range of video formats to select. We can say we want 640 by 780, 720 by 480. We can think about, do we want YUV color space, YUYU color space, or YUYV color space? Do we want to support RGB, RGBA, motion JPEG? All of these different, there's hundreds and hundreds of different combinatorial combinations of different video things you can deal with. So once you start getting into like jumping away from just having raw code that compiles where you can just like quickly edit things and change them around to deal with different resolutions or different sources, and you take that to the realm of, okay, well now I'm going to go and I've got something like Resolume, and we need to sort of make this be able to handle like every kind of video that someone might want to throw at it. So we need to have we need to be able to support codecs. We need to be able to support USB inputs, NDI inputs, siphon inputs, spout inputs, various kinds of streaming I/O things, and it just gets incredibly complicated. So that's one of the big reasons that for my Patreon we have the limit of if we have to get the Patreon to like $1,200 per month, to the point where I'm even gonna like start working on making a one-click installer for the video waves suite, because that's one of the big obstacles to overcome, is just how many different kinds of video formats are we going to support, and how do we integrate that into like a one-click installer. I, kind of went lazy and said the easiest way to deal with it is just edit the code a tiny bit when you're not running it, recompile it and play it, and then you're good. So for most of my use cases, like I'll mostly just use the same resolution for like months at a time, and I'll mostly just use the same inputs for months at a time. So it works really well for me. People just getting started with this who think, well, I should be able to do the same sort of things that I do in like Resolume or whatever, are going to be like, why is this so clumsy? Why is this not so flexible? Why does this not have this massive support of like, why can't I just like drag and drop a video file in here and it'll play a video file? It's because doing that shit is really hard and complicated. It's a very low priority for me to do things like install video players in here when I can just do something sideways that seems much more useful, like installing NDI support. But yeah, so that's just a little bit about why I haven't, well, one reason I haven't really made this into like a one-click installer. The other reason is just I'm not very good at it. I've done it like once or twice in my life. I think I kind of fucked a couple of things up, and it's just like a lot of work. And from an outsider's perspective, you might be like, well, it's a lot of work to make the video waves shader things. It's a lot of work to make a wave pool. How is it just like so much more work to do the other thing? Well, the reason is I just have significantly less motivation to do so. I'm highly motivated to make video waves, work on the creative things on it, and like put things together because then I can play with it. I have practically zero motivation at the moment to put together one-click installers because it involves a giant amount of learning, energy, and work on my part, and it honestly won't really change the way I interact with video waves at all, because I'll still almost always want to prefer just running the raw code from the IDE so I can quickly edit and test things out instead of having this like monolithic frozen in place installer thing to work with. So that's what's going on there. So let's fast forward about 20 minutes. So you've got this Visual Studio installer has installed everything for you. You're going to want to go down and make sure to get this K-Lite codec pack. And this is pretty simple. You just download it, you run it, it installs a bunch of codecs. This will be very handy. 100%. You want to follow these steps. Well, actually, you don't need to disable automatic precompiled header. You don't need to care about this step. This is the step that you do need to care about. So Open Frameworks plugin for Visual Studio. So let me open up Visual Studio here quick and show you how it might look on here. Actually, there's literally just a video right here. Someone else already made a video for this. This is probably better than the one I have because I'm still running Visual Studio 2017. This is probably updated for 20... oh shit, no, it's Visual Studio 2015. It'll be the same thing. But just, I could play this video in here. You can watch it too. Like I said, this is a very hand-holdy thing here. You don't really need this video in order to install this. You probably just need a little bit more confidence and experience in doing things like this, and then you'll feel better about the whole process. So yeah. This is not tested with VS 2019 or newer. Alright. Yeah, you should probably... Let's see. Yeah, it's much better to use 2017 in my experiences, although I think they've fixed all the wonky stuff with 2019 in recent years from all the message board posts I've read. So it should be pretty chill. And I've actually run some workshops where people just did 2019 and 2017, and there was pretty much zero issues. So, yeah. I don't know, this seems like it's maybe a little disingenuous here, but they're just probably trying to, make sure they have their ass covered if people come to their GitHub page and notate, a million, fuck-ups. But yeah, so let's make sure... And let me just show you what happens. So you've expanded that zip that you downloaded earlier, the Video Waves WinLin folder. And it'll look like this. Video Waves 2718 WinLin. You go in here. You go into Apps. you go into My Apps, and you see all of these show up. So we can take a look at Video Waves 2.718. We go down here and we open up the VCX Proj. This will open up in Visual Studio. And you get a bunch of things that pop up everywhere. It will not default to give you a view of the code. If you're interested in the code, you click on this source folder over here, and then we see here's the information for GUI stuff. Here's how the GUI is drawn. This main.cpp, this is useful here. Settings.setSize is how you set and change the main window output for video. So default is 720p. If you want to work, if you're having troubles, things are going really slow, take your screen size a little bit smaller. 640 by 480, 1024 by 768, 1024 by 1024. You can really select any like random resolution you want, although best case is usually to work with something that is very close to whatever video input you're working with. At the very least, the same aspect ratio as video input, which is why I sort of settled on 1280 by 720 as the default one. Then we got this ofapp.h, that's the header file. Mostly don't need to give a shit about this one. And then let me just show you something else quick in here in ofapp.cpp. So Control F, this is how we find things in here. If I look up cam1, let's see, it's cam1. Did I rename that? Nope, still named cam1. And we get down here and we see cam1 list devices and cam1 set device ID. This is the way that you choose different inputs for your cam1 and cam2. So you just change this number. This list devices means that when you play it, you'll see this other little window pop up that will tell you all of the little video devices, the UVC video devices that your system recognizes, and you'll be able to say, okay, so I'm using some Elgato capture thing, that's device ID 3, and then I want to make sure if I want that to be Elgato, then I say device ID and I change that number to 3. And then in the same pop-up window that lists all of the device IDs, it would also tell you what the acceptable resolutions are. So say the only acceptable resolution for this Elgato capture device is 640 by 480. I would say, okay, let's delete that, bring that over there, and then Control S, and then I press play here, and that would get things started. Of course, I don't want to do that because that's not what I'm set up here, but that's just an example. So yeah, we start off like this, and the way that we compile the code and get to a place where we can play with it is to press play here. And if you press play, then everything pops up. It'll take a little bit, especially the first time you do this. It will take much longer time than you expect it will, because it will be compiling all of Open Frameworks. So Video Waves is built out of this sort of like collection of C++ libraries called Open Frameworks. And Open Frameworks is basically, you know, thousands and thousands of libraries that people have written to do like, to kind of like optimize like creative coding things. So I'm just sort of like using that because I didn't want to have to make everything myself. And you want to test things out, even if you have no input, you can always test things out by going to Global, click Tetrahedron, and we see a tetrahedron going on here, and I go into Frame Buffer 0, and I click on Mix and Key, press 1 here, and we should start to see this. We'll see that we've got one feedback channel here and a tetrahedron in front of it. I go over to geometry and we go zoom. And I go FBOX, FBOY, go all over the place. And now we're running. So that is more or less the nitty-gritty of how do you install things. And yeah, I kind of skipped over a lot of steps, but it's like the same thing. It's like the recipe thing. It's all written down. Follow the written instructions. You'll get there. Trust in yourself and trust me. Yeah, so one last thing to note here. Well, two last things to note. So something fun, once you've already got a compiled version of Video Waves on your folder, you go into this bin and you see that we have an exe that has showed up. So this is the compiled code right here. So if you don't need to edit anything else in your code, we can close out of Visual Studio here. You go into the bin folder, look for an exe, double click that, and this will just run the last compiled version of Video Waves. So you don't have to open up the Visual Studio Code every single time in order to play with it. You just have to compile it once, and as long as you're not planning on changing output resolutions, changing the camera inputs at all, you're pretty much good to go. So, yeah. Zoom, zoom, vroom. And yeah, I don't want to get too distracted by the features here because that's just an entirely different video itself. Probably be making one video for each one of these new blocks just to show a little in detail what goes on with each one of them. But yeah, fun fact, it does make an exe here. Ha 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 ha. I'm not sure if I've been explicit about that enough in the past before. You just do the same thing with each one of them. You just want to make sure you compile it at least once, have it set up to the settings you like, and then you run that exe whenever you run it again. So you don't need to have Visual Studio Code up and running all the time unless you're actively engaged in editing the code. So simple enough, right? Yeah, and then one last thing to think. So let's go back to my site here. You're going to want to look into this NDI tool stuff. I don't want to get too sidetracked on it now, but NDI is the answer. Anytime someone's like, I want to play a video file into this, I say look into the NDI stuff. NDI stuff is much more powerful than just being able to get a video file, like a pre-recorded video file, into your Video Wave setup. It is network based, so you can basically screen capture from any other computer that's on your local area network. Pretty amazing. The implementation on my side is very bare bones. Could use a lot of work. It's another thing that I'd need more funding and more time to develop if people want a lot more of that stuff. I don't think it's a huge priority for anyone though. So let's scroll down here. We see some ridiculous images I popped up everywhere. There's a lot more, not a lot, a couple more details for the Xcode things. I'll just make an entirely different version for Xcode. And also the other thing to keep in mind is I am not able to make you an instructional video or tell you how to install things on anything past OS X 10.14 or whatever. What's that one? Mojave? Forget about it. But the other one before Catalina. So Catalina and past, I can't give you much direct help with that. I don't have anything that runs those things, and once we get to the point of the M1 Silicon machines, I don't have any way to do that. And that's another reason I'm asking for a lot of financial support in order to make one-click installers, because for me to make useful one-click installers for everyone, I would have to have some sort of M1 Silicon machine in order to test and develop, because this is sort of the main thing about making installers is you have to be able to work directly on the system that you want to install on. And if there's a radically different hardware CPU, I have to work on that and test things out there. So that's just a little information there. So I will be able to give you information on OS X, but I think this information might be sadly outdated for most folks by this point. Because my most recent Mac piece of hardware is a MacBook from 2012. It runs really nicely. I like it a lot, but yeah, it's not. I guess probably not the most useful for anyone who is working with modern stuff. One thing I always like to mention too is do not direct message me on social medias for any help installing. I just don't offer this anymore. This is not something we do. I used to do this way back in the day. I was first getting started. It was an entirely different business because it was only maybe 1 or 2 people a month, and these were people who are already kind of technically savvy enough to get most of the things done. I just walk them through 1 or 2 extra steps. Sometimes people would pay me, and I just do a Zoom call and walk them through the last couple of troubleshooting steps. But it was different time, different era, different Andre. We just don't do that anymore. And just want to do a little digression onto why you should not DM me on social medias for help. One, if you do that, I'm going to assume that you haven't read the instructions. So I'm not going to respond to you. If you don't read the instructions, I'm not going to help you. You have to read all of the instructions, follow them to the best of your abilities, and if you're still having issues, then you need to try to get into contact. The other reason, well, I guess there's a bunch of reasons. The other thing is that I personally just don't check like DMs. Like, you know, I have so I've got a Discord. I am on message boards. I am, you know, I'm on Steam. I'm on you know, Scanlines. I'm on, you know, I check Facebook maybe once a month still, and people still keep messaging me there for some reason because people are still haven't gotten the hint that Facebook is a pile of shit yet. You know, there's just all of these different different social media areas where there's their own embedded terrible messaging system, and I made a decision a couple of years ago that if you want to get a hold of me and actually have a real serious conversation about anything, you got to use email. The reason I like to use email is it's only one thing I have to check. I don't have to hop on and off and log in and out of all of these different sites. Email works really good on my desktop computer. I don't want to have to I don't want to use my phone for this shit. It's uncomfortable. It's unergonomic, and you know, I've been actively working on not becoming a fucking phone zombie for several years too. And it's just terrible to organize. Most of these DM things on Discord or Instagram or whatever, they're just shit. They're shit organized. You can't really search things very well. You can't organize things. You can't put things into folders. You can't sort things out. You know, I get all of these people asking me for they have basically business requests. They want to hire me to do things on Instagram. I'm just literally just email me and we can talk. And most of them just won't even go to that one extra step. So it also just frustrates me when people just aren't willing to make the tiniest amount of effort to extend themselves in order to have a conversation in a better format. So yeah, this is one of the other reasons that I'm just not I highly discourage people from trying to message me on all of these different medias, is because it's why the fuck do you expect people to keep track of all of these conversations and all these different things all the time? It's literally kind of bad for your brain. It's bad for your attention span. And I wouldn't I did used to do that all the time for the first year of doing the wave pool business thing. I would respond to shit everywhere all the time, pretty regularly. And I realized after months and months of that is that you just don't get anything fucking done if that's what you're doing all the time. If you actually have any real work to fucking do, you can't be hopping over and rechecking messages on all these different social media sites. It's a total drain of your time and energy. And honestly, most of the questions are the same all the time. So you just make a website and put all the information there, then that kind of should theoretically solve most of the questions that need to be asked. So that's one reason, and that's a very personal reason. I'm sharing it mainly because I'd like to share my experiences with people, and not just be don't message me, fuck off. Because you can email me, and I will respond to all of my emails. Even if it is only the response of you didn't quite read this thing right, go back and check again. The other reason is, say you followed all the steps, you did everything correct, and you're experiencing some sort of an error. Or you missed one of the steps, but it's a step that a lot of people miss, and maybe I wrote something poorly, maybe there's something buggy happening on the Open Frameworks page, whatever. There's many valid questions that you can have about this, and I'm not trying to invalidate your questions or your personal difficulty with things. What I'm mostly trying to say is that you need to get into the habit of putting these things into a forum. You put these together into a forum. I should probably edit this to add the Discord on here, but Scanlines XYZ is probably the #1 best place to talk about this if you want me to notice it and respond to it at some point, because I'm not super big on Discord in general. I think it's just a giant chaotic AOL chat thing. So not super up on Discord. Very useful for some things, not the most useful for archiving information. Scanlines, on the other hand, is excellent for archiving information. But if you go and you post your questions in the forum instead of pointing them at me directly, then one, it gives everyone else in the community a chance to pitch in and help out. And this is the most important thing here, is that everyone else in the community, you're doing this for the first time, but everyone else who has installed VideoWaves had to do it for the first time too. So there's hundreds and hundreds of other people out there who've run through the same steps, who had the same problems as you, and they can help you first. Like, you got to get out of this habit of appealing to authority as though I'm like some kind of like genius, like wizard person who's gonna like fix everything for you. Not least and last, because I'm going to go on a very severe social media digital communication hiatus starting next summer or so. So I'm just going to be, forthright about not going to be like very responsive to questions even on email at that point. But the other thing is that you can help each other, and then when you learn, someone else teaches you how to do this thing, you also have the ability to teach someone else how to do this too. So this is sort of a synergistic way of like encouraging people to learn from each other, teach each other, and like actually sort of build some sort of like a proactive community about this kind of shit, instead of encouraging everyone just to like, okay, just pipe everything through me individually, and then I will personally, like Santa Claus, answer every single one of your prayers and questions. It's just inefficient. It's a dumb way to do things. It solves very little problems, and it adds a lot of problems. So get involved with the communities. That's the most important things we can do here. Get out of the habit of petitioning authorities and get back into the habit of like asking groups of people to help you out with things. And like I've mentioned before, you do kind of have to change up your approach and your attitude to things. If you're only used to a consumerist relationship with software tools, you got to step back, realize this doesn't apply here, this doesn't apply to everything, and realize that you have to be a bit more patient, friendly, willing to work together, willing to communicate, and but just be like forthright and forgiving of the fact that everyone involved is a human being. They have their own goals, priorities, intentions, emotions, and everything, and everyone is just helping you out because they want to, not because some fucking asshole is paying them to. And you actually get real and useful and supportive help if you get help from people who want to do it, instead of the kind of bullshit you get if you like call a support line or like an email chat line and all you get is like some pre-programmed script telling you to turn it off and on again. So it's going to make everyone's lives a lot better if you can get into this habit, not just for VideoWaves, but for everything. Which is, like this brings me to the main point here of like what I'm trying to do with these videos, what I'm trying to do with VideoWaves, what I'm trying to do with like the main purpose of my life going forward is trying to build community solidarity between folks and get folks back in the habit of respectfully engaging with one another in a bid to increase everyone's intelligence and capacity for learning and capacity for teaching. So I guess that's a good place as any to go out. As usual, have fun. Stay tuned for OS X 10.14 and previous instructional video. And also check out, if you're running a newer Mac Silicon M1 operating system thing, Charlie Popper made a really, really nice and handy and informative video for how to do that. So they've, thank them a million times for their hard work and all the effort they put into that, and take a look at that one. I guess, yeah. Head over to scanlines.xyz, hang out there, ask questions. There's a really great community there of video artists, an ever-growing community of video artists, video tool makers, various kinds of like techno nerds who are growing increasingly dissatisfied and disenchanted with the walled gardens and corporate consumerist hellscapes of Instagram and Facebook and Discord and TikTok and whatever other kind of like bullshit social media things are out there. But yeah. On that note, I guess that's the end of this video. Good luck with everything. Have fun, and sign up for my Patreon.